Satisfactory has been one of my favorite games released in the last few years. However, it can get very overwhelming. This leads to players losing interest in what they're doing and quitting the game. However, today I have a few tips which might stop one from feeling bored, overwhelmed, or even frustrated in Satisfactory 1.0. And if you enjoy videos like this, feel free to drop a like, it massively helps. Tip number 1. Take a break. And this could be anything from going to the shops, or even going for a run. Sometimes it's really good to break up what you're doing. This way you can tackle your challenges so much easier. Especially when you're working on bigger points, which is something I'll mention a bit later on. When you're doing the exact same thing for hours, it can feel very overwhelming. Whether it's connecting thousands of pipes, or tons of conveyor belts, or lots of logistic work. It can feel extremely overwhelming. Taking a small break can be exactly what you need, but how long of a break should you take? Well, obviously that's completely up to you. Sometimes all I need is an hour, and then I'm straight back at it. Sometimes it's a day. Other times it's a week. And again, this is just a video game. It's not supposed to feel like real life. If you feel overwhelmed at any point or frustrated, then definitely do consider taking a small break. A healthy mind can tackle even the most challenging of problems. Second tip I have is exploration. As you can see by the background gameplay, I absolutely love exploring in this game. But it wasn't always like that. Towards the very start of the game, where the only thing I had was concrete ramps, I found exploration to be rather difficult, especially since I was exploring around the Dune Desert and the Titan Forest, which hasn't really got very fun creatures or hostiles to try and deal with, again, especially for a new player, without any sort of weapon. I only had a Xenobasher at the time. Despite this, after I unlocked the jetpack and the rebar explosive rounds, I had an absolute blast, quite literally, going out exploring looking for hard drives, Sommer Sloop, Mercersphere, and of course, Power Slugs. All these items I've just mentioned have extremely important roles in Satisfactory as well, so it's not like you're going out exploring just to waste a bit of time. You're actually doing something extremely important and rather productive in the meantime, whilst also giving your mind a bit of a break. Sometimes I've gone out exploring for hours and I've kind of forgotten I'm playing a factory game. I think I mentioned a very similar point in one of my most recent videos, but it's important to highlight it again. In case you didn't know, Mercerspheres are mostly just used for dimensional depots. This way you can transport an item into the depot and it goes straight into your inventory. And it's safe to say Mercerspheres are absolutely incredible. Also, Sommer Sloops. Sommer Sloops have got a few different functions in Satisfactory 1.0, one of which is related to power slugs, which I will shortly discuss, and the other is mostly to do with the power augmenter. You can place down this thing and it gives you a ton of extra power, essentially for free. It only really costs you 10 Sommer Sloops and some other things are there as well. But it's amazing. But of course, you need Sommer Sloop to do this, and you can only really get Sommer Sloop if you go out exploring. Hard drives are extremely important, especially if you're like me and you use an absolute ton of alternate recipes. It will never not be satisfying collecting a hard drive. And then of course, we have the power slugs. In case you didn't know this, you can put your power slugs into a constructor, add the Sommer Sloop that we were talking about earlier, and it doubles the amount of power shards you can get. You can also quadruple the amount of alien DNA capsules you can get as well. I have made a bunch of videos talking about Sommer Sloop, Mercerspheres, power shards that I do highly recommend checking out, and all those videos will be on screen right now. In case it's not clear enough, I absolutely love exploring, and there's been days where I've explored for hours and I've really enjoyed it. It's a fantastic way to take your mind off the game whilst still technically playing the game. Not to mention, if you've already got things like coal power, oil, or even nuclear going at the time, then your factory should be running in the background whilst you're doing this. So you're producing items, you're earning coupons, and of course you're collecting all these other resources whilst you're out exploring. It's a win-win-win-win, which is, I mean, amazing. And of course, it's even more enjoyable when you've got better equipment to help you explore. Tip number 3. Take on smaller projects. This one mostly goes out for players that tend to do mega builds or larger projects rather than smaller builds. Sometimes it can get extremely overwhelming. For example, have a look at this project that I'm currently working on. I'm trying to make a bit of power, about 100,000 megawatts worth, and this is everything that I'm needing to use it. I'm currently working on all these pipes in my blenders, which, again, is an absolute nightmare logistically to try and do. but I'm still really enjoying it though. This has taken me a couple of weeks already, and I haven't even created fuel yet. As you can imagine, I do get overwhelmed, and sometimes I just want to stop and do something else. So again, I go out exploring, or I take a small break. I might play Call of Duty one day. I might come back the next day feeling really refreshed. Also, what I do is sometimes I head back to my starter factory and work on a few more logistic works over there, rather than constantly just dealing with our fluids over in the turbo fuel factory. As of right now on the channel, I have got tons of tutorials and guides, so make sure you are subscribed if you find things like this interesting. It massively supports the channel. Thank you very much, and back to the video. Taking on smaller projects will make things feel a lot better for the player. I've definitely noticed that myself at least. And I would 1000% recommend doing this, especially if you are newer towards the game and you're trying your very first big project. Sometimes it's nice just to take a small break in between and work on something else instead. Or, even better, have 2 or 3 projects going on at once. The only issue with this though is that again you might even feel more overwhelmed from doing this, knowing that you don't only have one big project, but now you might have 3 or 4. Tip number 4. Balance. We have briefly touched upon this, so I won't spend too long talking about this. In Satisfactory, there are multiple different things you can do. You could either work on logistics, you can work on the interior of a factory or the exterior of a factory to try and make it look pretty from the outside. And obviously, again, you can go out exploring. Let's say you're bored of exploring, which is fair enough. You can then work on some exterior projects of a build. Bored of that, you can work on the interior. Bored of that, again, you can then work on more logistic work. Bored of that, then, I mean, again, maybe you might want to use tip 1, which is take a break. Essentially, if you're feeling overwhelmed for one thing, don't think that's the only thing that you can do in Satisfactory. There's multiple different ways that you can spend your time on the game. Obviously, as you could probably tell from tip number 1, I'm not sponsored by Satisfactory to only say good things about the game, so I do generally recommend taking a break if the game does feel a bit too much for you. But still, I do honestly think there are tons of things in Satisfactory that can take your mind off of these things. If you get bored of point A, do point B, etc, etc. And luckily in Satisfactory, as I'm sure most of us are aware, there is always something to do. Tip number 5 is a tip I've actually started using myself recently, and that's to experiment with different styles. Originally, for the last few years now, I'd say, I have built very similar style factories on every single save I've done. I've made nice, neat looking factories from above, and I've added a logistics floor down below, where it's absolute spaghetti and everything goes everywhere, and sometimes even I lose track of what I'm actually doing. So in my recent series that I've started here on YouTube and over on my Twitch, where I'll be streaming every single day essentially, Satisfactory, if you guys like Satisfactory, feel free to follow the Twitch. Shameless plug, I do apologise. What I've started to do on that series is I have no longer done logistics floors for my starter factory. And in return, this is what's happened. I'm sure I'll show you guys a few cinematic clips of me walking around my starter factory, but this is a build that I would never ever would have done if I didn't stop using logistic floors. And doing this has almost made me feel more attached to this starter factory, because again, it is just a starter factory. We are producing things like modular engines and adaptive control units and a bunch of oil related stuff, but I still consider it a starter factory. The way it's grown and been shaped over time has been such a pleasure to witness, and I feel like having all these exposed conveyor belts and pipes all over the place just add to that atmosphere that I've never ever had in this game before. Because again, I hide all of my belts, so the only thing I really see is the machines. Because I've been doing this for years, it feels like I'm just building the exact same factory again and again and again, into, again, this brand new series where I've decided to screw that, to completely scrap it, and to go with this instead, which is a completely different playstyle than what I normally use. And I'm loving it. My point is, sometimes switching up your playstyle can be the difference between you loving something or hating something. And even at first, you might absolutely dislike what you're doing, but the more you continue and keeping on, you might actually enjoy it in the end. I know I most certainly did. Tip number 6, play with friends. Satisfactory has got an official Discord where you can join and you can play with other people over on that Discord. I believe you have to be over the age of 13 to join any Discord, so do bear that in mind. Regardless, there are people in Discord that do want to play with other people, and playing with friends or even strangers at first can still be quite fun. The only issue with this is that you might have slightly different playstyles, which I know I keep talking about playstyles, but it's generally rather important. If someone likes to build modular factories and they've got one way of playing, but then you have a completely different way of playing, sometimes that works amazingly, like yin and yang, like that, I think it's Chinese thing, right? Other times it can be rather frustrating. You might have to do all the work when they do absolutely nothing. Then sometimes you might get bored themselves and log off for 3 months. So then you're left all by yourself to do all the work. So there are some positives and negatives of all this, but if you do want to play with friends, go ahead. If you don't know any friends that play the game, or if you're like me and you're lacking in friends, then feel free to join their Discord, and who knows, you could even make a couple of friends. Tip number 7, mods. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about mods, because I believe it deserves an entire video by itself, and in fact there's a couple really good videos out there already talking about mods. But essentially, you can completely change your game with mods, especially, and you might have heard about this one, Satisfactory Plus. I'm pretty sure Bits made a series on Satisfactory Plus, and Bits is a really good content creator, so feel free to go check him out. And it looks really cool, like, especially if you're used to like the regular Satisfactory for the last couple of years, or even the last few months, regardless. It's a complete change of pace, there's brand new machines, and there's tons of new assets that you can get in the game. The only issue at the time of recording is that I don't know if mods, especially Satisfactory Plus, are 1.0 compatible. Because unfortunately, when they release a brand new update on Satisfactory, all the modders have to update their mods. So I don't know if that's all working fully at the time of recording, but hopefully further down the line, if you're watching this in 2025, I mean, I hope the new year's going good, hopefully nothing tragic's happened to you yet, but hopefully, all the mods should be able to be fully functional by then. Of course, until 1.1 comes out, then 1.2, and who knows what's going to come out after that. But regardless, mods are a fantastic way to completely switch up your game. I do recommend that if you are feeling a bit bored of vanilla Satisfactory. Either way, those are my 7 tips to stop getting bored in Satisfactory 1.0. I really hope that you guys did enjoy. If you want me to make a similar video to this, let me know in the comments down below. But either way, thank you very much for watching. Before we go, a massive thank you to our members, Mau Mau, Skull and Hattie, Lo, Netormal, Chaos Rising, Cutthroat Zoo, Yamikel, and Tio Rico.